Most people viewed this, and not without reason, as the most insane and uneven fight in the history of this city, taking on the richest, most feared media monolith, not just in Australia, but in the world.
We said, well, if we're going to fight, let's fight good, and we fought good, and he got beat.
Hi there, I'm Mikey Robbins, and tonight's Australian story is about the South Sydney Rabbitohs, my football team. But it's more than a story about a football team. It's about a small community that took on a multinational, multimedia organisation. It all started years ago when Rupert Murdoch's News Limited brought in Super League to cash in on pay TV. Well, that ended up with, almost 2 years ago, the amount of teams being reduced and Souths being given the boot. But the powers that be had no idea of the forces they'd unleashed.
How dopey would you have to be to have rugby league without South Sydney? You'd have to be stupid, and it won't happen.
How many of you people would follow rugby league if the mighty Rabbitohs were not in the competition? I agree.
5 days before its exclusion from the NRL competition, Souths staged a Reclaim the Game rally outside the town hall. And I saw a lineup of very, very famous people. I remember thinking to myself, I was with my son, that it was almost inconceivable that with that sort of support and with the numbers that were there present that day, that News and the NRL would take that fateful step to exclude South.
South Sydney has so much to offer this game. So much to offer this game. We are so far from dead.
The rally was the lead on every evening news. 50,000 people turned up, the largest sporting protest ever seen in Australia. It was on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, and the Telegraph, which was the most read paper in the city, was a story that big on page 44. That was actually the turning point. I actually believe that was the moment where News Limited lost the battle. It absolutely hardened our resolve. There was no question that we were being done over.
We do exist, and will exist as long as you people support us, as long as you back us.
I think everyone involved in this fight was mad, but no one was madder than George Piggins. And I don't just mean mad angry, I mean mad stubborn. Probably the hardest thing in the world to defeat is a man who knows he is right, even though everyone else tells him he is wrong.
I was born and brought up in Mascot. My father was a wharf labourer. I went down the waterfront as soon as my father could get me a job down there. Work was more important to me to go and play football, and it was my father at the time who says, look, you know, if you play football and you get a break out of it, you can get a house out of it. I played in the 71 grand final at South 1. It was probably the biggest thrill of my life, and I was lucky enough to be picked to play for Australia. I was well known for a few fights on the field, but I never started any of them. I just stuck up for myself. I won't be stood over, I know that. I do have the attitude that I'll, you know, while I've got breath in me, that I'll keep going, and hopefully I'll finish on top. I don't like to lose, you know, but I don't look for fights either.
Look, the NRL has took us out of the competition for the year 2000.
I feel like I could die now. That's how I feel.
Rugby league's nothing. South Sydney is what it's all about. We are the army! The Rabbitoh Army!
South Sydney is a community club, and it meant so much to us. It was kind of the holy grail as far as, you know, sport was concerned, as far as we were concerned. News Limited and the NRL, they underestimated, but they didn't really want to know. That was the sad point. And they took it upon themselves to just put us out of the competition, and, you know, like it was the first thing in your life that you couldn't get out physically and grab hold of them by the scruff of the neck. You know, I mean, we just couldn't do that to them. They were, you know, upmarket people that just took our game off us, and, you know, that's it, you're finished. And the only course we had left to us was to go to the courts.
Most people viewed this, and not without reason, as the most insane and uneven fight in the history of this city, It was a club representing the most put-upon working-class part of Sydney, taking on the richest, most feared media monolith, not just in Australia, but in the world.
I don't think George cared too much about who he was fighting. He just thought nobody was entitled to close that football club down. George, I've made a cup of coffee. People underestimate how intelligent George is because he's always feeling inferior. He has this hang-up about not being able to spell. But George has great vision and he sums things up pretty quickly, and George always sees the big picture.
I probably regret in some ways I lack a little bit of formal education, but it's never hindered me, and really and truly people are killed to have the lifestyle I've got.
OK, well, I'll go down and have a look at it.
I enjoy being a wharf labourer, but playing football, I had that extra little bit of money. I tried to better myself by getting into my own business, and I bought myself a truck. I built the business up to where we had 9 trucks, and it just snowballed into a very lucrative business. She's not too bad. I appreciate you.
George worked extremely hard. His goal was to retire at 40, and he did. He sold his transport company for $1 million. What made George so successful in that business was that he invented and patented an electronic loading system which enabled him to cart much more product than his opposition.
When I was appointed South's lawyer, soon after its exclusion, there was an unbelievable sense of gloom in the place. One of the reasons for that despondency was that advice had been received from other lawyers prior to my appointment that the club's prospects of ever challenging what had occurred were fairly weak. I remember seeing tears in George's eyes, and I remember Andrew Denton in particular with his head in his hands saying words to the effect of, well, I suppose that's it then. I felt that at that moment, at my very first board meeting, I was witnessing the death of South.
Our lawyers at the time said we didn't have enough documentation to support a court case. And Nicholas, who was a rusted-on South supporter, came on the scene and said, no, I think we can fight this case, and the documentation must be there somewhere. And I guess we saw this highly qualified man who seemed to be as mad as the rest of us, and we thought, we're going with him.
We enlisted the support of a number of people, first and foremost Nolene Piggins, George's wife, who, in terrier-like fashion, was able to put together effectively a brief of documents.
Look, no one fought harder than Nolene, not even me. I think that she was just relentless. She was there every spare minute she had, and that'd be some mornings, 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, she'd be down there going through the archives and trying to pull out things that were going to help us.
It was a mad paper chase, and people from other clubs came forward with documentation that was pretty important to our case, and then supporters from our own club knew people from other clubs, and they gave us plenty of stuff too. George and I have a lot in common. We have the same interests. We both love rugby league and we both like the racing, and we get on very well together. Be careful. I think that we both depend on one another for support and strength. Let's hope he can give us a winner. George always fought the fight for the people, the supporters. He always felt that if South Sydney didn't survive, that he had other things in his life that he could go off and do. My fight was quite different to George's. I came from a very staunch Rabbitohs supporters family, and I'm not a religious person, but I felt that probably to me Souths was my religion. Souths was my church.
Nolan and myself have known one another since we were 5-year-old. We went to school together. She was smarter and she went to the A classes and I went to the D classes.
When George and I started high school, we had a crush on one another, but it didn't really develop because he thought I was a bit of a smart-ass and George was basically very shy and probably still is.
I knew she liked me as a teenager, but I just weren't mature enough. I was that boy thing, I suppose, and I just didn't have much confidence in myself, I suppose.
I think you've got enough horses, George. I'm not looking forward to one.
Well, at 17 years of age, I married somebody else, and so did she.
No.
I rented an Arlene one night at the club when we were about 24 years of age, and we've virtually been together ever since.
And it's glory to South Sydney. Get the lawyers on the phone. And we'll all stand together so the South can stand alone.
Finding the documents was a good start, but we still needed a lot of money to fund the court case. Just after we'd been kicked out of the league, Ray Martin phoned and he said to me, please tell me that we're not going to give up, we're going to fight on. And he said, well, what do we need to do? And I said, well, we need $200,000 pretty quickly. He said, you leave that to me. I'll phone Alan Jones and Andrew Denton and we'll co-host a huge dinner and we'll get the money.
Now, I'm told that, in fact, this is the record crowd. This is the biggest crowd they have ever served dinner to in this entertainment centre tonight. So congratulations. Coming up, mate.
On rugby league, Rupert, you are wrong.
This is a priceless item of rugby league memorabilia. That is 19. Thank you, Russell Crowe. You've got God on your side. That is 30. Thank you very much. This will not be repeated. 42 twice. Sold and still in the family to Russell Crowe and South Sydney. Part of the reason we had to raise quick money is that News Limited were withholding $500,000 that we were legally owed for participating in the 1999 competition. And they were withholding it to try and stop us taking legal action.
You've got to say to yourself, oh, strike me dead. Like, where does someone say, hey, that's unfair, you've got to pay these people because you owe it to them?
And we united in a determination bordering on anger to see that those responsible don't get away with it. The pigginses of this world lack the artifice of the people who made the decisions. They are people of very basic instincts. They understand loyalty and tradition.
This great club of ours deserves a turnout like this here tonight, and from the bottom of your heart, thanks very much.
They're in it for all the right reasons, to be able to do something for the young people who are involved in it, and to take those young people from where they are today to where you hope they might become better people, better athletes, better credentialed, more security in life, and you get a bit excited and say, hey, football did that to him.
George, do I have your total attention? Tonight, these fantastic people have raised $293,000 for South Sydney.
Keep up the pace, I tell you, I'll go down here.
We initially mounted our case in November 1999. We were unsuccessful in obtaining the interlocutory injunction we wanted to keep the football team on the field. But we still had the trial that commenced in June 2000.
The strongest part of the case was that when the ARL and Super League got together to make one competition, they decided to shrink that competition to 14 teams. South's never agreed to that, I might add. We argued that was a restriction of South's ability to trade under the Trade Practices Act, and indeed when we were excluded, it was a total denial of our right to trade.
The applicant, South Sydney District Rugby League Football Club, ordinarily known as Souths.
It wasn't your normal case for the lawyer running it. It could never be a normal case. Aside from the fleet of lawyers filling up the courtroom and a steady stream of press, you had, of course, the loyal South supporters who were coming to this game with the same loyalty that they'd go to a football match.
They are first News Limited, the first respondent,
Some were there, I would swear, for the 40 days of the long hearing, for days on end following the proceedings that were so complex that the lawyers had difficulty following them from time to time. It reminded me very much of someone sitting outside a hospital room while there's a loved one inside who's battling for their life.
The court was horrible. You couldn't make a noise, and if you had a lolly, everyone looked around at you, and I was in the witness box for 6 days, and I just thought they were just going about trying to make me look an idiot and look uneducated. You know, I'm the ex-footballer and we were dumb or something like that, but we weren't. We just were running a football club, and all of a sudden people thought that we should have had documentations like we were running BHP.
I was always concerned that whether I would have the resources to match our opponents who had flocks of lawyers and paralegals and looking after their interests.
What is it this time?
Small faxes from Minters and from Allen's.
My firm is not a big firm by any standards. It's a very small firm. I remember on one occasion arriving back at my office and finding a total of 27 faxes that had arrived from our opponents, each one requiring a complex and immediate reply. And I remember looking across the table to one of my colleagues in our boardroom and saying to him, how on earth are we going to answer all of these today? And somehow we did it, and we worked through the night on quite a few occasions. And I know because my opponents have commented to me since, in very good spirits, that they can't believe how we actually managed to keep up with them and how we didn't drown in the sea of paper.
Jump forward to about 3 or 4 pages in, around 9 o'clock-ish.
When you fight someone like News Limited, the Murdochs, they got all the money, and we just had to go around raising money the best way we can. We had very miserable people on the staff, and then we had the greatest group of volunteers. We had concerts, we had football games, we sold ribbons, we had nights back at the club. You know, we were stumbling, but we never dropped the ball.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's fantastic you all turned out here tonight. It just shows how much heart the old Rabbitoh side still got left in it.
Not only did we have to deal with the conglomerate of lawyers on the other side, but we also had a multi-headed client represented by a board, the club staff, and then all the supporters, and we're fielding 20, 30, 40, 50 phone calls from all different people who wanted to know how that day's court went.
Without Nick Pappas' hard work, we would have never got to the courtroom. This man is a legal genius, and we owe him a lot, folks, I tell you. Thank you, Nick.
And thinking back, I find it startling just how close we were on a couple of occasions to laying down and giving up. Not through lack of resolve, just through sheer lack of resources. And I suppose you could call it sheer exhaustion from time to time. Combined with those pressures was, I suppose, a realisation that would hit me every now and then that South, this club of such great tradition, was only hanging by the thread of this litigation. And as soon as that thread snapped, that was the end.
Thank you. Andrew, how are you?
One of the strongest attacks made on South is that we were not financially viable, that we couldn't field a team in the competition even if we wanted to. And the judge gave us 2 weeks under a thing called futility to prove that we're financially viable.
This could have been the stumbling block that could have defeated South's case there and then. But once again, as always with South, that never say die attitude always proves good. And South was able to secure some major sponsorship undertakings, first and foremost from Kerry Stokes, of $1 million per year over 3 years.
I decided to support the South Sydney Rabbitohs when in fact they had a visit from Mike Whitney and Andrew Denton. They came up to see me and told me the full story of the Rabbitohs, their passion, and I mean, I've never met 2 more committed people than they were to this cause.
For Kerry Stokes to step up and support South was a very ballsy thing to do. South were viewed as a losing cause, and he was a media player going up against the biggest media player of all.
I was given to understand they weren't particularly happy with us making this commitment, But as I said at the time, we made a commitment, and when we make a commitment, the commitment is sound, and I won't be swayed from breaking a commitment by anybody.
And I found that KPMG audit review.
South Sydney will be always grateful for what he did, because, you know, every avenue of trying to sink us, they tried.
In November 2000, His Honour Justice Finn delivered his judgment.
The orders of the court will be, 1, that the application be dismissed.
Bunny, bunny, bunny! Oi, oi, oi! Come on, everybody! Bunny, bunny, bunny! Oi, oi, oi!
And a terribly emotional day for you?
Well, it's, like I'm disappointed, extremely disappointed, but...
In football, you've got to be fair, and that's where, you know, everyone was missing the point. It mightn't have been against the law, but it was against sport, and it was against the community. It was against the Australian way of life, a fair go, and we never got it.
You've been trying to ask a question for some...
Have you got the wrong 14 teams in there?
We believe we've got the right 14 teams in there, and we're going to move forward.
It was a moment of great triumph for the NRL, but it was a moment of sweeping catastrophe for South and its supporters.
The night that South were axed when Today Tonight broadcast from here was the highest rating Today Tonight they've ever had. And when we got back to the club, far from everyone being down at mouth, there was an extraordinary air of defiance. It was just like, stuff them. We got them where we want them now. You know, we're on the floor and they're standing over us. Now they're in trouble. I've actually rethought it, George. I think if we're going to do it, you've got to go on the news tonight and do it. We decided on the spot on the day to have another rally.
Driving back to South was probably the most difficult drive of my life. South's application was dismissed on all grounds. I knew that the club was full of supporters, many of whom I'd heard on the radio were weeping. And I knew that I also had to walk into a boardroom to meet many of people who had now become very close friends and explain to them the import of the decision. I remember knocking on the door of the boardroom and then walking in, and all the directors were standing around the table applauding, and that was an extremely touching moment for me, that they had chosen to pass on to me at that most difficult moment for them their appreciation for what we tried to do up to that moment.
On the 12th of November, next Sunday week, we're going to march again.
Before we left the boardroom that day, we had resolved that we would explore any avenue of appeal that was open to South, that the fight would not end there.
We were confident in our lawyers at this stage. I think we would have followed Nicholas and that to the end of the earth, so we were pretty confident that we were going to come up with a victory.
The second rally was amazing. To get almost twice as much, 80,000 people, really was extraordinary.
Once again, South had that uncanny ability to turn a loss into a triumph. The loss in the courtroom became the triumph of the people on the streets. And that's what I think our opponents underestimated.
Right down this street where you're standing, they have what they call heritage buildings. And they say it's a heritage building and therefore you can't touch it. This club is a heritage club, and we're saying to the league, you can't touch it.
When people are right, people don't give in. And we weren't going to give in this. This was too important to us to give in.
The fight's not over till you people walk away, and I promise you, till you people walk away, I won't. I'll stay and fight.
George Piggins, when he spoke, people knew that this was not synthetic. To him, in his rugby league world, there'd only been one club, And the people who were marching in the streets were the same sort of people. He spoke the language that they spoke. He didn't ever pretend to be Mark Antony. He was no great orator, but the words just tripped out in a way which just was swamped with sincerity and good intentions, and they felt, here's our man, no matter the odds, he's not going to turn back.
As we got closer to the appeal, I could feel the spirit within the club reaching almost a climax that I hadn't seen before.
Confident things will go your way?
Well, I'm confident that no matter what...
This time I was confident. I really thought that, no, this is to be our day today. And then bang, he hit it, and I thought, you bloody beauty, you know, and we had him.
I would dismiss the appeal. I'm authorised by Justice Moore to say that he would allow the appeal.
I would also allow the appeal.
The leadership of George Piggins was obviously instrumental in holding this club together. It was, as I saw it, a real outburst of community cohesion that you seldom see in Australia, and it really is rewarding to see it happen. My first reaction was I grinned and thought, they've done it.
It's a terrific feeling to know that a case one has been involved in has made a difference to so many people. And I think the most heartwarming moment of the whole thing for me was when I went home and my son said to me at the front door, "We're going to the football, Dad." And that for me was everything.
The first thing that we've agreed on is that Souths are going to be back in the competition next year.
You don't beat mobs like News Limited unless you're right. And that's the reason we won. Like, you know, we were right and we had good fighters fighting for us. Our aim now is to get us back to where we were, the pride of the league. I believe that we'll be here for another 100 years, and hopefully no one will ever let them take it off us again.
If you're on the net, you can chat now with George and Noeline Piggins and others from tonight's story. Just go to abc.net.au/our story.